ensayas rápido, no te sabes poner pie. Esa es una que lo ensayas rápido, no te sabes poner pie. Esa es una que
Welcome to our third segment of Civil Discourse Now. I'm Mark Small.
And I'm Paul Walker.
Our guest is James Neese. We're coming to you today from the Indie Cigar Bar at 3357 East 86th Street, Indianapolis. And it's a gorgeous day outside. Tomorrow's Indianapolis 500. And this is Memorial Day weekend. We're talking about the economy. And we were just talking about locations of businesses and why people would want to locate a business in a certain area.
Yeah. I think what I was saying before the break was a lot of people that are very based on social issues don't tend to move companies where they feel like social issues aren't a major issue. It's not that the companies really want to inject themselves into politics in that sort of manner, but it's the population that makes up those cities. So if I was like to move to Seattle or move to San Diego, New York City, Trenton, New Jersey, or just these massive industrial scales for like IT technology, I'm moving with mostly like the youth. I mean, like I think 89% of our graduates in IT, computer science, the hard sciences tend to move westward. Like they'll graduate from Purdue, they'll graduate from IU, and as soon as they get that degree, within 2 months they're back home with their mom and dad. They save up money. As soon as they get the money, they're booked in Chicago, they're booked into Milwaukee, they're booked into Portland, Seattle.
But that's because that's where the jobs are. That's not because
that's where the social. It's where the jobs are, but part of the reason also is the social climate, because people will not want to live someplace where they don't necessarily feel welcome. And so if people are a more progressive view of lifestyle, they're not going to want to live, let's say, in the same town as Liberty University is located. So you're not going to find a lot of people wanting to live in a Jerry Falwell environment. And that's why you'll find more progressive cities, more progressive social mores are going to attract people, and that's why the companies do some of the things that they do.
What about all those smart conservatives out there? I know you're going to say that is a contradiction, but
oh, I wasn't going to use contradiction as the adjective.
Maybe they want to have an environment where they can raise families and suburbs and have conservative values. So do you think that's out there too?
I think that if they want to do that, they can do that. But I think you're going to find that when people are more acceptive of others' views and they don't want to exclude their views, those people tend to be more intelligent, more creative, and that's the environment that those are the types of employees that those companies want to attract. And so those companies will locate in those communities.
All right, let me bring an example that you'll agree with. You'll be on the other side of the fence. One of the arguments made about adopting a smoking ban here is it will bring business to the city. People will come to the city and say, oh, Indianapolis has a smoking ban. And the fact we didn't have a smoking ban, because I'm going to take it back to James first, didn't have a smoking ban in bars was a major negative on companies located here.
Who said that?
They've been saying that all the time.
They've been saying that. Who's they?
It's the people who promote the smoking ban.
Yes.
And it is a ruse. It is not true that there are people here, oh, I'm shocked by the fact you don't have a smoking ban in your bar, therefore I'm not coming back. I'm not going to have my business located here. I don't believe that, and I think it's a huge exaggeration at best.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that. Of course, I am opposed to the smoking ban. But going to the location, businesses located someplace are going to want to locate where they're going to get, especially if you're talking about IT and some in the higher technology industries, they're going to want to be places where people are of higher intellect and want to live.
Wait a second. Are you saying liberal people have higher intellect than conservative people?
No, I'm saying that the more intelligent a person is, usually the more tolerant that person is of other people.
But the polls show that the higher education you have, the higher income you make, the more likely you are to be a Republican, not a Democrat.
I'd have to see
I'm
those polls.
happy to bring that.
Well,
The higher education you have, the more likely you are to be a Republican, not a Democrat.
I imagine those polls were probably conducted on landlines. But that aside, let's look at the past a little bit and how we got here in terms of our economy. Because in the Depression, in the 1920s and the lead up to the Depression started in 1926, 1927, with farms, because the United States had heavily subsidized agriculture during World War I. People had gone into hock, and all of a sudden that was no longer a good investment. Credit was being given. We were loaning money overseas to Germany to pay off its wartime debt. And then the bubble burst in 29 and the Depression occurred.
That's like the Dust Bowl.
The Dust Bowl happened in 33, 34, I think it was. But the thing was, people were standing outside factories, willing to work, needing the goods that those factories could produce, and yet they didn't have jobs. No one could figure out why that was.
Even before the stock market crashed in 1929, before that Great Depression, like you go like 10, 15 years back, like you go back to when like the Federal Reserve was created, you go back before the Federal Reserve was created, you had a situation where the stock market was already tumbling. The stock market was already in decline, and people like J.P. Chase, J.P. Morgan were actually donating money into the stock market to try to revitalize, because we can't have this market fail. So they're throwing millions of dollars in banking money at this like stock market to keep the stock market afloat.
That happened in March of 29. There was a crash. J.P. Morgan walked onto the floor, Mitchell walked on the floor of the stock exchange with $25 million and would look at one of the traders and say, 10,000 shares General Electric, 10,000 shares RCA, 20,000 shares AT&T, and bought enough shares to make the market recover. Now, that was March of 29. It was 7 months before Black Monday and Black Thursday. But we had ups and downs in the market going back to the 1870s. To the 1830s, there were bank panics, because that was one thing that Andrew Jackson was elected on.
That's certainly the case. Now, if you want to talk about economics, Milton Friedman, who I read his books, he said what made the Depression worse was they actually cut the money supply during the Depression. When things started going south, they cut the money supply. He pointed out that's the one time we need to inject cash into the economy when the economy's going south.
Well, when it's depressed, that means inherently it needs more cash.
Right, but the fact is, we are all the time injecting money into the economy. We have major deficits. The deficit right now, out of every dollar we spend, the federal government spends, we borrow 40 cents. And that's a problem, because we're running up a huge debt.
But where is the money going? If you look at our federal budget, a huge amount of that money is going to defense. And that's a misnomer. It's not defense. It's going to the military, and it's going to the development, and it's even becoming more mechanized. At least now, today, poor kids, lower socioeconomic kids can have the hope of enlisting in the military and getting an education after risking getting their butts shot off. And at least they have that hope. I mean, that's one thing they can look for. Is 4 years of military, then maybe I can get to college. Because otherwise, college is off the table for most people financially in this country, because we've outpriced one of the most important aspects of infrastructure. But now what they're doing is mechanizing military, so we've got robots and drones doing it. So that now if you're poor and you want to get your ass shot off for the country to get an education, you can't even do that. So I think we've really screwed up the economy in so many ways. We have all these goods, and we don't have people to make those goods. We don't need it. After the Depression ended with World War II. Because we had World War II, the economy picked up because all of a sudden, Hitler didn't realize that overnight the United States could retool our factories from making refrigerators to making tanks and ships and guns. And then there was excellent planning for post-war, and we came out of that owning or controlling over half the world's wealth with 5% of the people. But now we don't have jobs for people who were used to having jobs because they've been replaced by machines.
So you're against, basically against some kind of progress, you're against the machines. You want to turn, you're a Luddite, or Luddite.
Luddite. Ned Ludd.
Exactly. And that's basically your philosophy.
No, it's not my philosophy, but I believe that if you're going to plan an economy, you have to plan it in such a way that I think that the factory system caused people to be alienated from the concept of a job. A job was not something that you did with any joy. A job was something you went to 40 hours a week. You got weekends from it, you got holidays from it, you got vacations from it. Other than that, you're supposed to hate it. They alienated people from work, and instead, they should have been telling people how you get a craft. You learn how to do something. You get into a profession. You do something because it's beneficial to you and to other people. We don't have that aspect, that thought behind employment, and that's something I think that is really deep in our culture.
The reason why you don't have that way of thinking, you have to meet your own means of production, is simply because the argument was presented by Marx. You can't use Marx as an example in economics, because here in America, if you bring up Marx, it's like visions of the Soviet Union. It's like, oh man, we can't use these theories, these labor theories, because if we touch these labor theories, it's going to throw us back to the Bolshevik Revolution. So like, even though that's correct with people, like you can work, I think it's like right now you have to work 155 hours in California at minimum wage to afford a two-bedroom apartment. I mean, I don't know anybody that works 155 hours a week. I mean, even splitting that in half with two people, you're still working an enormous amount of time just to make ends meet just for the apartment. That's not including gas, it's not including food, it's not including utilities.
It's not including cable.
Yeah, I mean, I think like right now you make minimum wage when you work, say you live in South Side Indianapolis, you work in downtown Indianapolis, you make minimum wage, almost a third of your earnings is going to go to the gas just to get back and forth and work through the highway system. So a third of your money is going to go for gasoline just to get to work, that you make more money at work to put back in your gas tank to go back to work. So it's like, you look at how people are getting paid and how people are actually progressing in their job, and like we're actually growing very slowly in our job market. We have people willing to work, but we aren't compensating them on an exchange that they should be compensated on. Nothing's really rising with inflation.
I think it's an interesting point, because getting towards the end of the segment, we'll be back for our last segment.